This is Movietone, Jeffrey Sumner reporting. You needn't stop the world if you want to get off. Astronaut Gordon Cooper certainly got away from it all to complete America's longest space flight, 22 orbits. Later, in 1963, the late President Kennedy suggested that America should combine with Russia for a joint expedition to the moon. If it ever comes off, will Valentina take part? The first woman cosmonaut chatted on the phone with Mr. Khrushchev during her flight. Valentina's achievement gives encouragement to male astronauts. You may not reach a galaxy, but you may bump into a girl. Space race, arms race, and a step towards general disarmament. The negotiations attended by a cheerful Mr. K to reach an agreement on banning nuclear tests. Thanks largely to Quentin Hogg, then Lord Hailsham, and his American colleague Mr. Harriman, the Moscow meetings resulted in a test ban treaty. But the commissioning of Dreadnought, Britain's first nuclear-powered submarine, reminds us that disarmament is still a long way off. A submariner's life has always been a hazardous one. The ill-fated Thresher, one of America's latest nuclear subs, lost with all hands 200 miles off Boston. A disaster wreathed in mystery, 1,400 fathoms down. From a mine gallery nearly 200 feet below the surface, 11 men are brought to safety, the dramatic sequel to the rescue of 3 others from the flooded Matilda mine at Lengede near Hanover. They were restored to safety after 14 days of waiting for rescue or death. Shortly afterwards, terrible news from Japan, the coal mine disaster in which over 450 lost their lives. 1963, a notorious year for the number and extent of its disasters. Ordeal by water in Italy. 2,500 people swept to their death when a landslide above a dam sent a wall of water down the Piave Valley. The burial ground of Longarone, the devastation of Skopje, and days after the earthquake struck, survivors were still miraculously being brought out. And yet survival can be a bitter burden. We recall that tragic incident in Katanga, when a Belgian family were accidentally fired upon by United Nations troops. They had been told they could go home, and that's what they were doing. Pictures which tell a terrible story of shock. His wife fatally wounded, his life shattered, and for no reason at all. For no reason at all, on a fateful November day in Dallas, the free world lost its leader, John F. Kennedy, the 4th American president, to die from an assassin's bullet. Less than 3 years after taking office, his body was brought back to Washington to lie in state. And the world mourned for a man who had given the world new hope. Upon President Johnson lay the responsibility to continue the work that Kennedy began, a heavy responsibility which he pledged himself to fulfill. The memory of those tragic days is still fresh in our minds. The bravery of Jacqueline Kennedy, her fortitude. The impressive international tribute, with leaders of 93 nations paying their last respects. No man understood human suffering better than Pope John. His death in 1963 was a loss not only to Roman Catholics. But his successor, Pope Paul, is also a man who combines humility and compassion with strength of purpose. His declared purpose is to continue the great work to create unity among the churches. Unity, political unity. Harold Macmillan, surely a man worthy of our sympathy, bore the burden of the Profumo affair and some of the blame in Lord Denning's report. But he also had to face an operation at a crucial moment for the future of his party and his leadership. The Profumo scandal was certainly Britain's political bombshell of '63. And even though notorious femme fatale may one day be forgotten, things will never be the same again. But the report cleared the air, allowing the new occupant of number 10 to face the future with new hope as well as a new name. What about sporting events in '63? Remember the final test at the Oval? Remember Conrad Hunt's century? "108, not out. 255 for 2, and jubilation sweeps the crowd across the field. Victory to the West Indians by 3 matches to 1. We join in a toast to another sportsman who became the highest athlete in the world. John Pennell poles over at 17 feet and 3/4 of an inch. Who was tops on the track? Graham Hill was to lose his world title to the Flying Scotsman Jim Clark, here winning the Reims Grand Prix. Consolation prize for Graham Hill, the special award to the Rover BRM which he drove at Le Mans, the first gas turbine car to compete. Carrying the flag on 2 wheels, Tommy Simpson, the first Englishman to win the Paris-Bordeaux race since 1891. Carrying his weight on 1 wheel, Monsieur Del Sol, who set a world record for unicycles, 50 miles, and blisters where they didn't ought to be. Have any luck in the National? If you backed out and about, your early hopes were out of luck. Remember the fantastic finishing duel between Carrick Begg and the outsider Ayala. Ayala, ridden by 19-year-old Pat Buckley, just gets home. Price 66 to 1. Who scored first in the Cup final? Dennis Law for Manchester United. In the second half, Hurd got number 2. He also filled in the space they'd left for number 3. The Cup for Manchester United. I wonder if he ever recovered. A different reaction from Coventry crowds when Colin Jordan married Françoise Dior. Britain's number 1 Nazi had quite a send-off. But the wedding of the year was, of course, at Westminster, the wedding of Princess Alexandra and Angus Ogilvy. The ceremony was conducted by the Archbishop of Canterbury.
With this ring I thee wed.
With this ring I thee wed.
With my body I thee worship.
With my body I thee worship.
And with all my worldly goods
And with all my worldly goods
I thee endow.
I thee endow.
Remember how Princess Anne took command of the bride's long train? This was certainly one of the most memorable events we were privileged to record during 1963. A white wedding at Westminster, to help us to forget the white winter with which the year began. May we wish you a happy new year and a warm one.